hard run stick. Hi and welcome to Bite 3 of the Wine Decoded Tasting Revolution. I'm really looking forward to getting into this one today. We're going to be talking about freshness and development in wines. Two different components, although to a degree slightly linked, and that's why we've paired them up today. Previously, in Bite 1, we talked about the depth and length of a wine and why it's important that it actually has depth of flavour and length of flavour. You want it to actually taste like something and not like just simply water with a splash of lemon juice in it. And we also talked about balance and complexity. Balance being when a wine has every component in place and nothing is sticking out too much. So the sugar, the acid, the alcohol, potentially some oak, and the fruit flavours are all sitting nicely in balance. We talked about complexity and the importance of having complexity. Why? Because it gives wine personality, it gives it intrigue, and it gives it interest. So moving on from those, it's freshness and development today. If you haven't gone and had a good look at Bite 1 and Bite 2 of the Wine Decoded Tasting Revolution, we suggest you head down in the page and click the button to go back to the first or the second one, the ones that you haven't seen, and have a look at them now because they provide great context with what we're doing today and will make it easier for you to get your head around today's session. In particular, you're going to need the samples that you prepared after Bite 1 of the Tasting Revolution, and these samples were simply created by grabbing a young bottle of white wine, filling a tonic bottle right to the brim with no air in it, and then grabbing a second tonic bottle, pouring a little bit of wine in it, and leaving lots of air in there. Now the air in there is going to start to oxidize that wine, whereas this wine with no airspace in there, full to the brim, is not oxidized at all. Now you can see what started to happen with these wines. And if I hold this card up against it, you can see the full bottle has quite a light color, a sort of a faintly yellow color, and the empty bottle or the half empty bottle has gone slightly golden and brown in color. So that's a sign for us that it's been oxidized. So if you see two bottles of the same wine from the same year and one is a darker color like this in terms of a white wine, there's a fair sign that that bottle isn't in great condition. Now, if you see a red wine, you'd expect it actually to be a bit lighter in color. Red wines tend to lose color as they oxidize, but they also go a little browner too. So a couple of things to look out for. What we want to do is get into those, taste them, and explore what's happened with them and how that's impacted the freshness of this wine. Again, today we're tasting with context and contrast. That is, we have the context of having a white wine that has varying degrees of freshness, and the contrast being one has been allowed to oxidize and the other has been kept fresh. So here we go, let's pour these out. Make sure you give yourself a good pour. It's important to go back and have a look at these a few times and really try and lock into your head the difference between a fresh and a stale or a not fresh wine. So we'll pour the slightly oxidized wine. First things first, let's go and have a look at a color. Now, when you're having a look at the color of a wine, it's really good to do it on a white background, so you're not confusing it with the color of the background. If I hold these over the table, they're just going to look brown. But if I hold them over the white card, I can see again the fresh wine, beautiful, pristine color, just a very, very, very pale yellow color, whereas the oxidized wine has gone quite golden and a little brown in color. So again, for me, knowing that these are exactly the same wine, a fair sign that this second glass has oxidized a little. So what's happened with that color change is that oxygen has interacted with what are called phenolic compounds, which come from the skins and seeds of the grapes, and turn those compounds from a clear color to a brown color by oxidizing them. Now we're going to kick in to just smell the wine. So I want you to take your time. Remember, give the glass a swirl. If you're not good at swirling, it'll come with practice, but the trick that we showed you earlier, swirl on the table, just make little circles and the wine will move around. If you're comfortable just swirling in your hand, just go for it. That swirling liberates the aroma and is going to make it easier for you to test or sense the smells that are coming out of the wine. So let's have a go. Big deep inhale, close your eyes, concentrate on those aromas. Now you've smelt that one, go to the second glass and smell the second glass. Again, swirl, take your time, big deep breath and really concentrate. So what I'm seeing here, and you'll see a very similar thing in your wine, are two dramatically different wines. The first glass has some quite lovely fresh fruit characters to it. It's still complex, as this has always been a complex wine. It looks like a good example of this wine, a good fresh example of this wine. But there's those lovely sweet fruit characters, some lovely perfume coming off the glass. You can sense some spice in that wine. Looking in great condition. When I smell this wine, very, very different. What I've got in there is a number of characters. There is now more of a bruised apple character and a nutty, almost almondy character to this wine. The fruit has really dropped off quite a lot, and the wine comes across as being a little bit sort of flat, dull, or stale, if you will. So again, we've seen a reaction happen here where the fruit aromas have been oxidized, but also the alcohol in the wine has been oxidized and produced aldehyde. And aldehyde gives you those bruised apple and almondy characters. So it makes sense that this wine is smelling like this. So recap, good fresh, vibrant fruit, lovely perfume and spice. Oxidized wine, fruit's dull, not really that obvious, and it's been replaced by this aldehyde character and a stale, flat aroma. Alrighty, let's taste them. So this time tasting, yes, smell them before you taste them, and then take a good mouthful in, swirl it around your mouth, concentrate on the flavors, also concentrate on the way the wine feels in your mouth, the textures, and if there's any bumps in there or not. So let's have a go at this one. First wine to taste. Let's go through the checklist of what we've talked about so far. Depth and length, tick and tick. Good depth of flavour, good length of flavour. Balance, is everything in its place? Yes. Sugar, acid, alcohol, all in place with some lovely sweet fruit balancing it out as well. No problem there. Complexity, yes. There's some complexity there. There's a few different characters in there giving this wine intrigue and personality. Now, freshness. Yes, definitely there. Still fresh, vibrant, lovely fruit characters, perfume, etc. Let's now have a look at the second wine and see how that looks by comparison. Yes, those aldehydic, nutty characters on the nose. Let's see what it tastes like. Now there is still fruit there, but it doesn't have the same depth and length as the first wine. It seems to be that little bit more dilute. Some of the sweet fruit characters have been replaced by this sweet aldehyde character, this bruised apple character. And that almond nuttiness is there. It's not necessarily an unpleasant flavour or aroma, but it's not what the wine should be, and it's not as nice as the first glass. There's also a very interesting textural element. The wine seems a little bit hollow in terms of its depth and length of flavour, and then all of a sudden at the back of my palate I'm getting a little hit, a hardness, and that is also coming from the aldehyde. So two very, very different wines giving us a very, very different experience. What you're really looking for in a wine is for it to have this freshness and not have lost fruit character and become hard and aggressive in your palate and be dominated by the aldehydes that this wine is showing. So recommend that you have another good look at these wines. Come back to it if you want to, put them aside, compare and contrast them. Do this exercise with red wines as well. And sometimes it can actually be even more obvious with a red wine when it falls over. The tannins in that wine will show much more overtly because there's no fruit to balance it out. Now that we've explored the extremes of freshness by having a look at a perfectly conditioned white wine, vibrant, lovely fruit, fresh as a daisy, and its oxidized counterpart that's gone a bit flat, lost its fruit, become a bit stale, and now is quite hard with those bruised apple, nutty aldehyde characters coming through. We need to cover one last thing, and that's the continuum of freshness by examining what happens as a wine ages in bottle. So no matter whether the wine is white, red, or any particular style, it should always have a core of fresh and vibrant fruit. As any wine ages, the spectrum of aromas and flavours will shift from primary fruity ones to secondary, more complex ones. In whites, we tend to see characters building like honeyed characters, nuttiness, toastiness, and shroomy characters, those sort of mushroomy, funky characters can come through. The primary fruity characters become less dominant. But for a wine to be fresh, those fruit aromas and flavours should still be there, providing the backbone of the wine. Similarly, for reds, we see the introduction of characters like earthiness, leatheriness, maybe some tobacco leafy characters, some truffly characters, and they'll build as the fruit characters become less dominant at the same time. Again, those fruit aromas and flavours will still be there, providing the backbone of the wine. At some point in time, the wine will fall off the cliff and lose its freshness, and that's what we saw today in the wines that we've tasted. Now, colour is a great indication of how far through that aging process we are. Whites will become darker in colour, shifting from perhaps a light yellow colour to a golden colour, and then eventually a brown colour. Reds will become lighter in colour, yet also eventually browner. And theoretically, with the right two wines, you could have a red wine and a white wine end up being the same colour given enough time for them to age and those processes of oxidation and chemical development to occur. So colour and hue, the hue of that colour, the intensity of that colour varies from variety to variety, and we've got a few great examples from Wine Folly here showing you a young Merlot and an aged Merlot, a young Cabernet and an old Cabernet, and a young and an old Sangiovese. So quick hot tip for you, if you've got the opportunity to buy an aged wine and there's a number of different bottles to choose from, choose by selecting the bottle that is firstly fullest, and secondly, also incorporate the colour of that wine. So if it's a white wine, choose the wine that is lightest in colour and least brown. If it's a red wine, choose the wine with the most intense colour and that is also the least brown. And that way you'll get the freshest bottle that's available.